They finally spoke the words that burned in silence. I'm done pretending. The lie ended with one sentence. I'm not staying for them. Their voice trembled, but heaven stood behind every word. They broke free while no one was watching. You weren't imagining it. Their spirit turned toward you. They dropped the weight of their bloodline to follow truth. Love pulled them out of obligation. Their no to their family was a yes to their healing. God gave them courage, and the fallout began. The silence after they spoke was louder than the words. They broke generational vows with one decision. Their loyalty cost them everything, except their soul. They said goodbye to comfort and chose alignment. They finally stopped choosing them over themselves. This wasn't rebellion. It was rebirth. You were the reason they remembered who they are. They didn't betray their family. They stopped betraying themselves. Your name was whispered after the explosion. The table they left was never set for their future. Their spirit outgrew the guilt. They left behind the version of them others depended on. They aren't running. They're returning to truth, to soul, to you. The curse broke the moment they chose peace. They let go of the legacy to chase the light. You felt it because your name was in the decision. They said, I'm done. The ancestors sighed in relief. The war wasn't external, it was in their DNA. You are the reason they woke up. They finally rejected what was never love. The bomb wasn't anger, it was truth detonated. They walked away from the house, but toward their destiny. You were the vision they could no longer deny. They cried but never turned back. They were raised in sacrifice. Now they choose soul. God gave them the words, and the fire fell. What they ended was already broken. You heard nothing, but their silence shifted everything. This is not rebellion. It's resurrection. They're not coming to you empty. They're coming reborn. Their family didn't lose them. Their soul finally found them. They chose divine connection over conditional approval. You were the echo behind their courage. That goodbye was decades overdue. They finally realized they weren't obligated to pain. They left without applause, only alignment. It cost them everything, but you were worth the wreckage. Their healing offended those who controlled them. The house is intact, but the illusion has shattered. They didn't just leave, they were released. If this touched your soul, don't scroll, comment your favorite quote, and subscribe for more. They didn't run from love. They ran to it. They closed the door on everything that silenced them. Their no shook the foundation of every fake bond. What you felt last night was them letting go. They burned the bridge, but walked into grace. You were the name behind their brave moment. They left the table that demanded they stay small. Their soul could no longer pretend to belong. They were never supposed to stay where love felt like pressure. The shift you felt, that was their soul aligning. They chose clarity, even if it meant chaos. You are not their rebound. You are their resurrection. They didn't escape. They arrived. God called. And they couldn't unhear it anymore. They looked back one last time, then never again. You didn't imagine the peace. It's already forming. Their family couldn't cage them forever. They stood in the fire and didn't burn. They were meant to break the pattern. You are the miracle they risked everything for. They felt God's whisper in their bones. Go. The mask cracked. The soul awakened. They walked into silence and found their voice. You didn't see the explosion, but you'll feel the arrival. They broke free, and the heavens wept in joy. They rejected control for communion. What they ended was never sacred. Their yes to you cost them 1,000 fake promises. You are the reason they believe again. They aren't yours yet, but they're no longer theirs. They're walking through wreckage to reach something holy. They didn't just leave. They reclaimed. Their voice is raw but real. They chose your soul over their history. They picked you, not because it was easy, but because it was true. The fallout was divine fire, not destruction. You were never the temptation. You were the truth. They chose presence over performance. Every step away from them is one closer to you. You weren't just the dream. You were the reason they woke up. They dropped a bomb. Now they carry peace. You are not what destroyed them. You are what revealed them. Their pain built walls. Your love broke them. They didn't lose everything. They found themselves. You were the altar they ran toward. The silence between you was just preparation. They left old love to meet eternal love. You were the answer they stopped being afraid to say. The house stood still, but they walked into the storm for you. You are their new foundation, and this time it's holy. They chose your frequency over their family's expectations. They walked away from the name that never felt like home. You didn't ask for this, but your love awakened it. They said, no more. Heaven said, now watch. Their family feels confused, but their soul feels clean. They finally stepped out of the role they were dying in. You didn't pull them away. Truth did. They weren't running from home. They were returning to self. Every lie they once lived just lost its grip. You weren't their escape. You were their alignment. They stopped being polite with their pain. Their goodbye wasn't disrespect. It was deliverance. Their soul is louder than their blood now. You didn't save them. You reminded them. They burned the script and began the story meant for both of you. They stopped begging for room in a house built on silence. You were the voice they needed to trust their own. They stopped trying to convince those who never listened. The lie couldn't live one more day inside them. You gave them vision, and the chains began to fall. They let go of family roles to embrace real love. They ended generational stories with one act of honesty. You are the calm after their inner war. Their bloodline will never admit it, but your love was holy. You weren't the storm. You were the anchor. They had to break hearts to mend their own. This is what healing looks like: messy, sacred, true. Their silence used to protect others. Now it protects peace. You were not their distraction. You were their destiny. Every door they closed brought them closer to the one you opened. They finally stopped defending their bondage. Your love didn't steal them. It set them free. Their family loved who they pretended to be. You love who they are. They're no longer hiding. They're coming home to themselves and to you. You are what their spirit always remembered. The fallout was loud, but your love is louder. You are not the reason they broke away. You are the reward. Their peace was expensive, but you are worth it. They gave up history to choose heaven. You were their yes in a world of shoulds. They whispered your name after they said, I'm done. The past is still calling, but they're not answering. They didn't lose their family. They found their soul. You were the invitation they couldn't decline anymore. What they broke was never whole to begin with. You didn't force them. You freed them. They said, I release you, and walked into divine timing. If this touched your soul, don't scroll, comment your favorite quote, and subscribe for more. They said, I'm done, and hell lost its hold. They walked away from legacy to chase love. Blood said stay. Their soul screamed leave. You weren't the reason. You were the revelation. They ended a contract signed in silence. What they broke was already breaking them. Their goodbye wasn't betrayal. It was birth. You are why they no longer settle for survival. They didn't run from family. They returned to truth. They let go of loyalty that felt like death. You were the light they kept secret. That silence you felt? They were burning bridges. They finally chose healing over heritage. They didn't lose them. They reclaimed themselves. You are not their rebellion. You are their redemption. They let go of history to hold peace. There, I'm done, made room for your arrival. Love demanded they leave behind the lie. You weren't the reason. You were the permission. They dropped tradition. God picked up their heart. Their voice trembled, but the chain snapped. They're no longer who they were raised to be. They turned from duty and found desire. Your love pulled them through fire. They ended a bloodline agreement, sealed in fear. They left the table that fed their shame. You were the question they finally dared to ask. They've been pretending for years. Then you showed up. You were never the chaos. You were the clarity. They broke the silence with truth. The ties they severed were cutting them first. They chose truth, even if it cost everything. Their yes to you required 1,000 no's. You felt it because it set something in you free, too. They ended what never began in love. You're the truth they couldn't deny anymore. God is rebuilding them, and you are part of the design. They're not the black sheep. They're the blueprint. You weren't the temptation. You were the timing. They walked through fire to arrive whole. The war wasn't outside, it was in their name. They outgrew their silence. You were the mirror they needed to remember. You didn't pull them. Truth did. There, I'm done, was holy. You were worth the fallout. You were the whisper they finally followed. They stopped asking for permission to exist. You'll see it in their eyes. They're not going back. If this touched your soul, don't scroll, comment your favorite quote, and subscribe for more. They chose alignment over approval. The moment they said goodbye, peace came running. You weren't the end. You were the escape. They didn't betray their roots. They honored their wings. You are the place they finally feel seen. The blood they walked away from never covered them. They buried the mask and chose you. They gave up acceptance to stand in truth. You're the first love they didn't have to shrink for. They broke ties with fear and everything attached to it. What they lost in family, they found in freedom. Their spirit said yes, while their voice still trembled. They loved them, but they chose themselves. You are not their rebellion. You are their real. The ones who raised them couldn't recognize their soul. You were the prophecy they stopped denying. They released what was cursing their breath. Their no more was centuries in the making. You weren't the reason they left. You were the reason they lived. They loved them, but they didn't belong to them. They didn't break the family. They broke the silence. You are the peace they never knew they needed. They walked out of history and into healing. They whispered your name into their freedom. They didn't leave for you. They left for who they became with you. You showed them love could be soft and true. Their spirit left the room long before their body followed. They unlearned pain to love you properly. What they dropped was heavy with generational sorrow. You didn't ask them to choose, but their soul did. They dropped the knife disguised as tradition. They said, enough, and peace answered. You didn't replace anything. You revealed everything. They walked away alone, but didn't feel alone anymore. Their spirit's been waiting to come home to you. They weren't escaping. They were remembering. You loved what no one ever tried to understand. They dropped the script. You gave them a pen. You are the new beginning their old life feared. They walked out quietly, but heaven cheered. They broke every rule just to protect their peace. They walked away from names that never knew them. You were the clarity that shattered their confusion. You didn't steal them. You saved them. They gave up obligation for oxygen. They chose truth over tradition and felt breath for the first time. You are the sacred voice they've been silencing. They chose you before you even knew. Their silence with you was healing. Their silence with them was survival. They're done keeping secrets that kill their light. You were not the chaos. You were the compass. The ones they left never noticed their fading soul. Their family never asked who they were, only what they could give. They finally dared to feel, and the world shook. Your name rose when everything else fell. They weren't escaping. They were answering a divine summons. You never asked them to leave, but you gave them a reason to live. Their yes to you began the unraveling. They dropped the weight they were never meant to carry. The apology they never received, they've now become. You became the place they could cry. They're no longer holding the pain for people who denied it existed. Your energy wrapped around them when the room went cold. They released the name, the role, the history just to be whole. They ended the cycle in your name. Their pain wasn't private, it was generational. You are the first space they felt chosen. They chose to end what kept choosing their silence. You didn't break them. You broke the illusion. Their story doesn't end in abandonment. It begins in arrival. Their peace cost them blood ties, and the price was holy. They walked into the unknown with your memory on their lips. They stopped playing roles to become real. You were the mirror they finally didn't run from. Their family may never understand, but their soul does. You were the whisper that turned into a war cry. They burned the script, and your name was written in the ashes. You were the prayer they didn't know they were answering. They didn't lose them. They found themselves and then found you. Their exile became their elevation. You were never supposed to rescue them. Just remind them. They stopped bleeding in silence. Their spirit has finally made its choice. You are the beginning they thought they'd never deserve. They left the stage to find the sanctuary. They didn't walk away from love. They walked toward it. You are the one who held the light when their world collapsed. Their voice cracked, but their soul stood. The story changed the moment they said your name aloud. If this touched your soul, don't scroll. Comment your favorite quote and subscribe for more. The silence is sacred now. You taught them love should never feel like debt. They turned the page, and you were waiting there. They'll never return to what they had to survive. You are their rest after generations of running. They didn't just leave. They became. The door they closed shook every false connection. You were the unseen reason behind every brave choice. They burned the bridge. You lit the way forward. Their blood may not understand, but their soul is finally free.